I want to bring in Douglas McNeill. He is an equity analyst at Charles Stanley Securities, and he covers the travel sector. First of all, Douglas, welcome this morning. Just taking a look at what we are hearing, the airlines are starting to make quite a lot of noise about how much this is costing them. And indeed, there have been reports about smaller airlines going to the wall. Do you think this is a bit overblown so far?
Well, I think what you have to remember is that the industry isn't in bad shape at the moment because the players that remain have been tested by adversity. They've come through the fuel price spike of 2008 and they've survived the recession. And those two things drove a lot of the marginal players to the wall. The names are quite familiar: Silverjet, MaxJet, XL, Zoom, and so on. The players that remain are in reasonably solid shape, and I don't think that we're close to a wave of insolvencies across the sector, and I think governments know that. Right.
Of course, what they're asking for is a bailout. Yesterday, they were talking about a bailout from Europe. Today, I think British Airways, not just British Airways, but all British airlines, are talking to the government, asking them for a bailout. Coming up to an election, probably nobody wants to say no, but it doesn't look very easy to work, does it?
No, there's a question as to who you would involve in a bailout. Would it be scheduled airlines? Would you look to the charter airlines, the tour operators? What about airline caterers, private jet operators, and so on? And I think it's difficult to argue that airlines are systemically important in the way that individual banks can be. And the banking industry, even a relatively small bank going down can damage confidence in others, which are in fact perfectly solid. But in the airlines, it's not the same.
There are a few anomalies, though, that stick out. Michael O'Leary from Ryanair was talking yesterday about the fact that somebody who buys a 15, 20 euro ticket on his budget airline and then ends up stuck somewhere can claim for all their accommodation, all their meals. That does seem like, for once, Michael O'Leary has a fairly valid point.
Yes, this is the EU Directive 261 of 2004, as it's called, and the airlines are a bit sore about that. And they've got a sound case there, I think. If they're going to get any help from governments, that's the place where they might get it, because that regulation was designed to cater to circumstances where people needed to be put up in a hotel for one night, at most two, not to provide them with a week's accommodation at the airline's expense.
Now, let's look at this knock-on effect. I mean, we know there's a second ash cloud. I know this is terribly unpredictable and you're not a volcanologist, but is there a real concern that we're going to see disruption over the coming weeks, months? And indeed, is it going to mean, if the threat is there, that business people are going to be very cautious about flying because they don't want to end up being the person who's stuck in Hong Kong that they've been watching on television this week?
Yes, well, there's certainly a danger of more disruption. We hear about this second cloud coming in. And a big question is what happens when the dust settles, literally. Will people rush back to flying or will they be reluctant to do so, as they were after 9/11, if you remember them?
Yes.
So a marked decline in people's propensity to travel. Some of the tour operators have been saying this week that about 90% of the customers they have affected are choosing to rebook for a later date, so they're not going away. And I suspect we'll see a lot of pent-up demand for travel coming back just as soon as this is over.
So still plenty of optimism. So you don't think that the long-term effects at the moment look to be that serious?
No, I think this is largely to be seen as a one-off effect. Most airlines will get through this, even small ones, unless the disruption goes on for perhaps as much as a month. I suspect we won't be thinking much about this when we're reviewing company results in 6 months' time.
Interesting. Douglas McNeill, thank you very much indeed.